Over the past 4 years, the city has been trying to eliminate fatal crashes in the streets of Boston by 2030. During 2018, there were more crashes resulting in injuries, but fewer that were fatal. And with data from last year, advocates in the Massachusetts Vision Zero Coalition are calling for new safety measures. Our guest is from one of the groups in the coalition, the LivableStreets Alliance. We'd like to welcome the Public Policy and Operations Manager, Louisa Gag. Thank you very much for being with us, Louisa.
Thanks for having me.
Louisa, what about that count from 2018? More crashes resulting in injuries, even though fewer of these were fatal. I mean, was this a good or a bad year?
Yeah, so we would definitely like to commend the city and are feeling very proud that they've more than halved the number of fatal crashes in the last 3 years, from 21 crashes in 2016 down to 10 in 2018. But we also think it's important to look at the number of injury crashes, which are much higher numbers. Over 4,300 happened in 2018, and that number hasn't reduced in the last 3 years and has actually increased slightly.
Well, one thing we know has happened in recent years is the city has reduced the default speed limit. Could that have had an effect on this?
Yes, and actually there was a report put out by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety that did find that the City of Boston lowering the default speed limit from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour does reduce the likelihood that drivers will speed. And so that's definitely something to commend the city for. And we know that one of the most important things that you can do to improve safety is to slow drivers down, because the likelihood of your survival if you're hit by a car traveling at a slower speed versus a higher speed is a lot higher.
Has this been going on in other cities where maybe they've been doing it longer than Boston?
Yes, I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but New York City has also seen kind of a measurable reduction in serious and fatal crashes since they've implemented Vision Zero. So we see this, not only as a great marker in Boston, but kind of a marker for the movement nationwide as a whole, and kind of hope to see the city continue to make progress and make an impact on those injury crash numbers as well.
Well, as you know, there were some crashes last year that really made quite an impression on people, a sad impression, of course, including some involving pedestrians. What do you think the city should be doing to make that happen less often?
Yeah, so one thing that we brought up in our report is requesting or recommending that the city focus more on arterial streets. So they're doing a great job. They have a program called the Neighborhood Slow Streets program that's incredibly popular, and community groups or just organized neighbors can come together and apply to the city to be accepted into this Neighborhood Slow Streets program, and then the city will work with residents to implement traffic calming measures. But those slow zones are more on like small side streets, residential streets, and not on arterials. And if you go onto the City of Boston's website on their Vision Zero crash map, you can see that the arterials and the main corridors are the ones that are all lit up with crashes. And so we would really like to see the city making faster progress on main arterials.
I'm thinking of a couple of these fatalities. One was on a fairly busy, I don't know if it was really an arterial exactly, but it was a fairly busy street in South Boston. Another one on Center Street in Roxbury. So these are streets where I wouldn't say people were really, streaking, at high speed, but they were going fast enough where they couldn't prevent that fatality.
Yep, and the city actually in both of those cases on L Street in South Boston and Center Street in West Roxbury has been able to do rapid response traffic calming measures to address kind of spot fixes in order to address the safety issues that were made apparent by the fatal crashes. So things like daylighting, crosswalks, so removing just a few parking spaces on either side of a crosswalk so that the visibility is better for drivers. They can see a pedestrian in the crosswalk or kind of waiting to cross. Other changes, traffic calming changes that you could make to prevent a fatal crash like that would be a raised crosswalk. So it sort of works as a speed hump to slow the car down, and also rather than the pedestrian stepping off the curb and kind of into the car's jurisdiction, the car is going up and raising to the level of the sidewalk, and kind of makes it, kind of reminds drivers that people will be crossing here.
Well, one of the things that we have more frequently now are these signs that tell you if you're going too fast. They're portable signs. They can be put in different places. How well do those work, and how long do they work?
Yeah, so I don't know of the exact data on that, and I do know that they can make kind of a short-term effect on slowing drivers down, and it's been great to see the city employing, I think there's over 30 new speed feedback signs that they've put up around the city, and they can kind of use those as rapid response measures after serious crashes. One thing that we do recommend in our report is that the city, it's great that they've put these signs out, but then to take the next step to actually collect the data from the signs and analyze the data to kind of understand what speeding is happening and kind of more long-term or infrastructure changes that they could make to that street or that intersection in order to prevent speeding.
You mentioned the map and those intersections that are real hotspots for trouble. Give me an example of one that still needs some attention.
So Mass Ave is an example that we talk about a lot because the city has done great work to improve safety on part of Mass Ave. So between the river and Harrison Ave, they've implemented protected bike lanes, and Mass Ave kind of along its stretch is a hot spot. But south of Harrison Ave, those changes haven't been made yet, and so we're really pushing the city to kind of to also implement changes in the lower income neighborhoods that Mass Ave goes through, and not just in the wealthy Back Bay.
This is Being the News, and we're talking with Louisa Gag from LivableStreets Alliance. Louisa, what about bicycle safety? We still have these fatal crashes, oftentimes with a trailer truck involved or something at least very big. Why is that still happening?
Yeah, and actually I would like to point out, kind of parsing out the data that we're seeing from the city in the last 3 years, is that while pedestrian crashes have increased, crashes involving people biking have actually increased. And so we see this as evidence that the city kind of should be investing more energy and resources into bike infrastructure. And certainly truck safety is a big part of that. So truck side guards are these devices that you can install on the side of trucks that prevent vulnerable road users like people on bikes from going under the wheels of a truck if they are struck. And so that has great safety implications. There's also trucks installing additional mirrors to reduce blind spots, as well as backup cameras. We've seen a few fatalities in the last few years in Boston and other Metro Boston cities, where trucks have backed up and killed someone. And so these are all measures that kind of the city can play a role in, but also there is work to be done at the state level in terms of policy to be passed.
Well, I get the impression that there is this enormous progress in bike infrastructure, but there's also a huge gap between that and what's needed. How would you describe it?
Yeah, so we definitely would like to see more protected bike lanes. That's a really important measure. So rather than just putting, a painted bike lane on the street, you have some kind of physical separation, whether that's a cycle track and the bike lane is actually up on the curb, like you'll see on part of Mass Ave near Symphony Hall, or a bike lane that is parking protected, so in between the line of parked cars and the curb. You'll see that on Beacon Street in the Back Bay. Or just separated with a buffer and then flex posts. And so seeing the number of protected bike lane miles increase in the city of Boston would go a long way towards improving conditions for people who do bike now, and also encouraging folks who might not feel safe enough to bike now to get out there and get on their bike.
And if you add scooters to the mix, what would that mean?
Yeah, scooters kind of throws a whole wrench in things. We're seeing the pilot and how it's going in Brookline now, and expect that other cities in Metro Boston will follow suit soon. And LivableStreets' position is, that scooters are a great option, if done right, if the conditions are safe, that people have a lane to be in on the street where it's safe for them to ride scooters, and that they can really fill a gap in terms of first last mile, getting folks from their homes to the train, or getting people out of their cars and onto a scooter instead.
Well, I know there's also an overlap between safety and congestion, and I think one of the goals that many people have is to reduce congestion. Not only to avoid gridlock, but because of climate change. What do you think the city should be doing to ease congestion?
Yes, so as many folks probably know, the city of Boston was just ranked the most congested city in the country for 2018, so not a title that we should be proud of. And certainly mode shift is a big part of reducing congestion, so getting people out of their cars and using other modes of transportation, whether that's walking or riding a bike or a scooter or taking the T. And so kind of one tool in our toolbox to encourage that mode shift is rethinking the way we allocate the limited space on our streets. So that might be changing a parking lane to a bus-only lane during morning rush hour, for example, like the city has done on Washington Street in Roslindale. And so that then allows more people to move more efficiently on a lane that formerly was just used for parked cars.
And finally, we should have you make one more observation about helping the city with data about traffic dangers. I guess there is a Vision Zero website where people can do, if they know something in their neighborhood that needs attention.
Yes, yeah, the city has a map on their Vision Zero website where you can submit like intersections or kind of issues in your neighborhood that you know about that you would like the city to look at in terms of safety.
And finally, for people who want to check out Livable Streets, you have a place online for that too?
Yes, LivableStreets.info, and you can learn more about the Massachusetts Vision Zero Coalition and our recent progress report at visionzerocoalition.org.